Clayton Reeves had lived through many winters on the high plains, but that night felt colder than anything he had known before. The sky was dark and heavy, the wind sharp like broken glass cutting through his coat. His horse, Dusty, snorted clouds of cold air as they moved slowly toward the cabin. Clayton had spent the evening checking the cattle and making sure none had wandered too far. Out here, if an animal strayed even a little, the cold could take it before sunrise. He was tired, his hands stiff from the weather, and all he wanted was the warmth of the fire waiting at home. But halfway along the narrow creek trail, Dusty suddenly stopped. The horse's ears pointed forward, alert. Clayton frowned and looked around. The creek was half frozen, water moving slowly under a skin of ice. Snowflakes drifted down, making the scene quiet and still. Clayton listened, thinking maybe a wolf or coyote was moving through the brush. Instead, he heard a faint, uneven sound like a soft moan carried by the wind. He climbed off the horse and walked toward the rocks by the creek. His boots crunched on the thin ice. The cold felt dangerous, like it wanted to reach inside his bones. As he stepped closer, he saw something dark lying on the ground, half covered in snow. He crouched down, brushed the snow away, and froze in surprise. It was a woman. She was curled tightly, her body shaking with small, weak tremors. Her long, dark hair was wet and frozen at the tips. Her clothes were torn and soaked, as if she had crossed the icy creek in a desperate attempt to escape something. For a moment, Clayton could hardly believe what he was seeing. An Apache woman this far into the outskirts. Alone, in such a winter storm, something must have gone terribly wrong. He touched her shoulder gently. She flinched, her eyes opening just a crack. They were dark, filled with fear and exhaustion. Her lips were pale, and when she tried to speak, only a broken whisper came out. Clayton leaned closer. "You're freezing," he said softly. "You won't survive out here." She seemed barely aware of his words. Her teeth chattered so much she couldn't control them. He could feel the cold radiating from her, stronger than the air around them. He knew enough about winter injuries to understand she was at the edge of danger past the point where fire and blankets alone would help. He looked around quickly. Leaving her there was not an option. No matter what tensions existed between settlers and Apache groups, he would not let a human being die while he stood there doing nothing. He lifted her carefully, surprised by how light she felt, light in a troubling way, like someone who hadn't eaten properly in days. She let out a soft sound, but she didn't fight him. She didn't have the strength. Clayton carried her to the horse and secured her in his arms as he climbed on. Dusty started moving, sensing the urgency. The wind grew stronger, pushing against them as they rode toward the cabin. Clayton tried to shield her with his coat, holding her closer to share what warmth he could. Her head rested against his chest, her breath shallow and uneven. When he reached the cabin, he pushed the door open with his shoulder and hurried inside. The air inside was cold, but still better than outside. He placed her near the fireplace and immediately worked to light a strong flame. The wood caught quickly, sending warm orange light across the room. Clayton knelt beside her and removed her wet coat and outer layers, being careful and respectful. Keeping his eyes lowered, he wrapped her in thick blankets, though he could tell they would not be enough by themselves. The cold inside her seemed too deep. Her breathing was shallow and shaky. She tried to sit up but fell back with a weak gasp. Clayton gently pressed her shoulder. "Don't move," he said. "You need to rest." She didn't answer. Her eyes were unfocused, like she could barely see him. Clayton realized she might not even understand English. Or maybe the cold had taken too much from her already. Her hands trembled violently under the blankets. He gave her a tin cup of warm water, holding it to her mouth. She sipped a little, but most of it dribbled down her chin. She was far worse off than he first thought. Clayton stepped back and rubbed his forehead. The fire was helping, but not fast enough. He knew what that kind of shaking meant. The body was losing its strength to fight the cold. If she slipped any further, she could fall asleep and never wake up. He paced for a moment, torn between caution and necessity. "I'm going to help you stay warm," he said softly. "It's the only way. All right?" Her eyelids fluttered. She heard him but didn't respond. Clayton took a deep breath and lay down beside her, on top of the blankets, keeping a careful distance at first. The heat from his body was the strongest warmth available to her right now. He lifted part of the blanket and allowed her to lean closer if she needed. At first, she did not move. Her shivering continued, stronger than before, almost painful to watch. Then, slowly, her frozen fingers reached out, touching his arm lightly, as if asking for permission. Clayton nodded gently, and she inched closer, still trembling. He wrapped one arm lightly around her shoulders, not tightly, not forcefully, just enough to share his warmth. She pressed her forehead against his chest, and he could feel how cold her skin was. Her breathing was rough, uneven. Clayton spoke quietly, his tone calm and steady. "You're safe. I'm just helping you stay warm. Nothing else, I promise." Bit by bit, her shaking began to soften, though it didn't stop completely. The minutes felt long as he kept her steady, listening to her breath, watching the fire grow stronger. He stayed awake, whispering reassuring words whenever she stirred or tensed up. After some time, she whispered something. Her voice was weak, but he heard a single word, her name. "Nayeli." Clayton repeated it softly. "Nayeli, you're going to be all right." She closed her eyes again, trusting his voice. He felt a strange mix of responsibility and protectiveness wash over him. This woman, a stranger, someone from a group many settlers misunderstood, was depending completely on him for her life tonight. He didn't think about the stories people told or the warnings others might give. None of that mattered here. She was cold, alone, scared, and he was the only person who could help her. Hours passed. The wind outside howled, pressing against the cabin walls. Clayton kept the fire alive by feeding it more wood. Each time she stirred, he checked her breathing. Sometimes she woke suddenly, panic in her eyes. But he spoke softly, easing her fear. By the time dawn arrived, faint and pale through the frosted window, her shivering had eased significantly. She was still weak, but no longer shaking uncontrollably. Clayton carefully shifted away from her, letting her rest on the warm blankets while he checked the fire again. Nayeli opened her eyes slowly, watching him with confusion mixed with quiet gratitude. She didn't speak, but her expression held something like respect, a sign that she understood he had protected her, not harmed her. Clayton prepared warm broth and helped her sit up enough to drink it. She watched him closely, studying his face, his movements, the way he spoke gently and kept his distance. She saw no threat in his eyes, only calm responsibility. When she finally spoke, her voice was still fragile. "Why, help?" Clayton shrugged lightly, not wanting to make it sound heroic. "Because no one deserves to freeze out there," he said. "Doesn't matter who they are." Nayeli looked at him for a long moment, absorbing his words as the morning sun slowly brightened the cabin. For the first time since he found her in the snow, she allowed herself to take a deeper breath. Something inside her, something heavy and fearful, seemed to loosen just a little. The long night had passed. Her life had been saved. And though neither of them knew it yet, this was only the beginning of a story that would change both of their fates. Clayton kept a careful eye on Nayeli as the morning light slowly spread across the cabin. The fire gave off a steady warmth now, and the harsh cold from the night before felt like a distant memory, at least inside the small wooden home. Outside, winter still waited, heavy and dangerous. But in the cabin, the air was softer, almost calm. Nayeli sat wrapped in blankets, her body still weak, but her shivering had lessened. Clayton placed a warm bowl of broth in her hands. She tried to drink slowly, though her fingers were trembling. He didn't rush her. Instead, he sat across from her on a small wooden stool, giving her space while staying close enough if she needed help. She watched him cautiously at first. Her dark eyes moved over his face, measuring every expression. She still didn't fully trust him. And Clayton understood that. He didn't expect instant trust, not after what she must have gone through. "You feeling a little better?" he asked quietly. She nodded, but even that small movement seemed to require effort. Her voice came out in a whisper. "Warmer?" "Yes." Clayton offered a gentle smile. "Good. That's what matters." Quote, "Also see." Quoten. Nayeli lowered her gaze, almost shy. She didn't understand why this cowboy, this stranger, was being so patient. She had met settlers before. Some were kind, some were not. None had ever carried her out of the snow and stayed awake all night to make sure she lived. Her thoughts drifted, and she noticed her clothes drying near the fire. Her mind flashed back to the freezing creek she had crossed, the icy water dragging her down, and the fear that had chased her for days. She closed her eyes briefly, fighting the memory. Clayton noticed her breathing change. "Don't push yourself to think too hard," he said softly. "You're safe now." The word safe made her chest tighten. Safe was something she had not felt in many days. Clayton stood and brought another log for the fire. The flames rose higher, filling the cabin with a warm, golden light. Nayeli felt the heat on her skin. Soothing, but still strange, after the freezing night. After a long silence, she whispered, "Why did you help?" Clayton looked back at her, his expression calm and honest. "Because you needed it. That's enough reason for me." Her eyes softened. She didn't reply, but she held his gaze for a moment. He didn't look away or act uncomfortable. He simply returned the look with gentle steadiness. Hours passed slowly. Clayton moved around the cabin, tending to chores, preparing more food, making sure the fire never dimmed. He didn't ask Nayeli too many questions. He didn't want to scare her or make her feel pressured. She watched him quietly. The way he worked told her something important. He wasn't pretending to be kind, he simply was. Every movement was natural, steady, and respectful. When she finally gathered strength to stand, she braced herself on the wooden wall. Clayton immediately stepped closer in case she fell, but he kept his hands at his sides. "You don't have to get up yet," he said. She shook her head. "I must try." Her legs were unsteady, but she managed to stand for a moment. Then her knees weakened, and Clayton gently reached out, steadying her by the arm, but letting go quickly so she didn't feel trapped. "Easy," he said softly. "Your body is still cold inside. It needs time." She nodded and sat back down. For a while, neither spoke. The calm silence between them felt strangely comfortable, like two people learning how to share a space without forcing words. Later, as the afternoon light dimmed, Clayton began preparing a strong stew. Nayeli finally found the courage to speak again. "You stayed awake all night?" Clayton hesitated, then nodded. "Mostly. Had to keep the fire going. And I didn't want anything to happen to you." Her fingers tightened around the edge of the blanket. No one had watched over her like that before. Not since her family. Her voice softened in a way she didn't expect. "You saved me." Clayton didn't answer immediately. He poured the stew into a bowl and handed it to her. "I just did what was right. Anyone else would have done the same." She tilted her head slightly. "No, not anyone." Clayton didn't argue. He could tell she was speaking from experience, from things she had survived before they even met. He didn't want to press her. When she finished eating, her strength improved. She could sit without leaning on the wall now. Her eyes were brighter, more alert. She looked around the cabin, noticing the simple tools, the arrangement of firewood, the animal skins hung to dry. Everything spoke of hard work and loneliness. She finally asked, "You live alone?" "Mostly," Clayton replied. "Cattle don't take care of themselves. I'm out here most of the year." He gave a small smile. "It's quiet. But I don't mind quiet." Nayeli nodded slowly. She understood quiet very well, too well, maybe. As the evening grew colder, the temperature inside the cabin began to drop again. Clayton added more wood, but Nayeli still felt cold inside. The deep cold that came from being exposed for too long. She wrapped the blankets tighter and tried not to shiver. Clayton noticed. He walked over and knelt beside her, speaking gently. "Nayeli, listen. This cold, your body hasn't recovered from it yet. The blankets won't be enough for tonight." She looked down, knowing he was right. She could already feel the chill creeping into her fingertips. Clayton kept his voice calm and respectful. "If you're comfortable with it, I can help you stay warm again. Like last night." "Oh." She looked up sharply, unsure at first. But the memory of the freezing night was still fresh in her mind. She remembered how her body shook, how her breath weakened, how her eyes almost closed for the last time. And she remembered his warmth, steady and safe, keeping her alive through the long hours. She hesitated, not because she feared him, but because the idea of relying on someone was new to her. "You mean, to hold close?" she whispered. Clayton nodded, his voice gentle. Nayeli studied him for a long moment. Her instincts, sharpened by days of running and danger, did not sense harm from him. She could see sincerity in his eyes, plain, honest sincerity. Slowly, she nodded. "I understand." Clayton spread the blankets on the bed and helped her settle down on top of them. He lay beside her, careful as always, leaving a respectful space at first. But as the cold deepened, she felt her body start to shake again. Her fingers brushed his arm timidly, seeking warmth. "It's all right," he whispered. "You can come closer." She moved gently, resting against him. Her breath was still uneven, but soon the warmth began to spread. He placed one arm around her shoulders, lightly, not gripping, not holding, simply supporting. The closeness felt strangely peaceful, like shelter after a long storm. Minutes passed, then hours. The cold faded. The fire crackled softly, casting dancing shadows on the cabin walls. The wind outside grew louder, but inside, the warmth was steady and safe. Once, Nayeli woke with a small gasp, startled by a dream. "You're safe," he said. "I'm right here." She felt his calm voice wash over her like a soothing balm. She relaxed and let her eyes close again. Later in the night, she whispered softly, "Thank you, Clayton." The way she pronounced his name made him smile in the dark. "You're welcome," he replied. They stayed like that until the chill of the night faded and the first pale light of dawn touched the windows. For the first time since she fled into the freezing wilderness, Nayeli slept without fear. Clayton didn't sleep much, but he didn't mind. Protecting her felt like the only right thing to do. And as dawn arrived, he realized something quietly. This wasn't just a stranger he had rescued anymore. Something gentle and unspoken was forming between them. Something built on trust, survival, and the warmth they had shared on the coldest night he'd ever known. Little did they know, the peace would not last long. Danger was closer than either of them realized, and the coming days would test the fragile bond forming between them. But for now, in that small cabin warmed by fire and trust, both found a rare moment of safety neither had expected to find. The morning sun rose slowly, turning the frost on the cabin window into shining crystals. Clayton stepped outside to check on Dusty and make sure no wild animals had come near during the night. The cold air bit at his face, but it was nothing like the dangerous freeze from before. This cold felt normal, something he could handle. Inside, Nayeli sat near the fire, wrapped in blankets but able to sit without shaking. Her color had improved, and her eyes looked clearer. She watched Clayton through the window as he moved around with calm, steady motions. She still didn't completely understand him. A man living alone out here could easily choose selfishness, cruelty, or indifference. But he hadn't. He had helped her, fed her, and even shared warmth to save her life, while keeping a respectful distance the entire time. When Clayton returned, he brushed off the snow and hung his coat near the door. "You're looking better today," he said with a small smile. Nayeli gave a faint nod. "Stronger?" "Yes." He poured her a warm cup of herbal tea and sat on the stool across from her. She held the cup close, feeling comfort in its heat. She wanted to thank him again, but English words came slowly to her, and her throat still felt tight. Clayton didn't rush her. He simply waited. After a long moment, she whispered, "Your kindness. Unexpected." Clayton scratched the back of his neck awkwardly. "It's just the right thing to do. Anyone would help someone freezing like that." She looked at him directly, her dark eyes sharper now. "No. Not anyone." Her voice was calm, but full of meaning. It made Clayton pause. He could tell she had seen things that taught her that not everyone chose mercy. He didn't push. He didn't ask what she had gone through. Instead, he said softly, "Well, you're safe here. That's what matters." She nodded. But the word safe stirred memories she'd been trying to forget. She lowered her gaze, and Clayton noticed the small tremble in her fingers, not from cold, but from fear. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" he asked gently. She hesitated, biting her lip. Then she whispered, "Men." Clayton's jaw tightened, but he kept his expression calm so she wouldn't feel pressured. "Outlaws," she continued quietly. "They chase Apache women. They take whatever they want." Clayton felt a heavy weight settle in his chest. He didn't need details. The fear in her voice was enough to know she had been running not just from the cold, but from danger far darker. "How long have they been after you?" he asked softly. 3 days, maybe 4, she said, her eyes unfocused as she tried to remember. "I hide in trees, rocks, water, always running." Clayton clenched his hands, trying to stay calm. He didn't want to frighten her with anger, even though the thought of men hunting a woman made something burn deep inside him. "You're safe now," he repeated, even more gently than before. "They can't get you here." But Nayeli didn't seem fully convinced. She stared at the door as if imagining shadows moving outside. Clayton noticed. He moved closer, but stayed a good arm's length away so she wouldn't feel trapped. "Nayeli," he said quietly, "I won't let anyone hurt you. Not while you're here." She looked up, surprised by the firmness in his voice. Trust flickered in her eyes for a moment, a tiny light fighting through the fear. The rest of the morning went by quietly. Nayeli rested, ate more food, and slowly regained strength. She even helped wash the bowls, though her hands were still shaky. But around midday, Clayton stepped outside to chop firewood, and something caught his attention. Footprints. Fresh ones. They weren't his. They weren't from Nayeli, and they were too deep and wide to belong to a single traveler. Clayton crouched down, examining them carefully. The pattern suggested horses. At least 3. They had passed near his cabin, close enough that he wondered if they had stopped. He followed the trail a short distance but didn't go too far. He didn't want to leave Nayeli alone, long enough for danger to return. When he came back, his face carried a seriousness Nayeli hadn't seen yet. She froze when she saw him enter with stiff shoulders. "What is it?" she whispered. "Jockin," she whispered. Clayton closed the door gently, locking it. "Tracks," he said softly. "Horse tracks. Not old ones." Nayeli's breath caught. Her eyes widened with fear, and she held the blanket closer around herself. Clayton immediately raised his hands in a calming gesture. "It's all right," he said. "They're not here now, and they don't know you're inside." But we need to be careful. Nayeli swallowed hard. They search everywhere. They won't stop. Clayton's voice grew firm. Then they'll find a cowboy who's not afraid of them. Nayeli stared at him, confused. Clayton sat down slowly, choosing his words carefully. Because you didn't deserve what happened. And no one deserves to be hunted. He paused. And because you trusted me last night. That means something. She lowered her eyes. She remembered resting against him, feeling warmth, safety, things she had not felt in a long time. It was hard to accept such kindness. But she had no reason left to doubt him. The day passed with a tension neither could ignore. Clayton kept the rifle near the door, not to scare her, but to be ready if the outlaws returned. He wasn't a violent man, and he preferred solving problems with words, but he would defend his home and the people in it, if necessary. As the afternoon light faded, Nayeli spoke again in a small voice. They came close before? Yes, Clayton admitted. Close enough to worry me. Nayeli hugged the blanket tighter. If they find me, they hurt you too. Clayton shook his head firmly. I'm not letting that happen. Not to you, and not to me. His voice carried a confidence she didn't have, but hearing it brought a strange comfort, like a strong hand pulling someone out of deep water. As night approached, the cold began to creep into the cabin again. Clayton added more wood to the fire, but he remembered how Nayeli had shivered the previous night. Though she was stronger today, her body was not fully recovered. When the temperature dropped further, Clayton glanced at her. She was trying to hide it, but he saw the faint tremble in her hands again. You don't have to pretend, he said softly. The cold's still affecting you. Nayeli looked away, embarrassed. She didn't want to appear weak. But Clayton walked over and knelt beside her, his tone gentle and understanding. Just like last night, he said. If you need help staying warm, I'm right here. Her heart beat faster not from fear, but from something new and unfamiliar. She hesitated for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. Yes, she whispered. Warmth helps. Clayton laid out the blankets again, and they settled on top. Nayeli moved closer on her own this time, trusting him more than she had before. She rested lightly against him, and he placed his arm around her shoulders, careful and respectful. The warmth spread again, steady and comforting. Nayeli felt her breathing calm. Clayton spoke softly. They might not come back, he said. But if they do, we'll be ready. I promise. Nayeli closed her eyes. You protect me. But why? Clayton took a deep breath. Because no one protected you before. And someone should have. Those words touched something deep inside her. She didn't respond with words. Instead, she leaned a little closer, finding comfort in his steady heartbeat, his strength, his quiet promise. The night grew darker, the wind stronger. But inside the cabin, wrapped in shared warmth, Nayeli felt safe enough to drift to sleep. Clayton stayed awake, listening to the wind, listening for any sound that didn't belong. He knew danger was near. He knew the outlaws might return. But he also knew something else. He wasn't alone anymore. Nayeli's presence had changed everything. She wasn't just someone he rescued. She was someone he felt responsible for. Someone whose safety mattered deeply. As Nayeli slept peacefully against him, Clayton made a silent promise to himself. No matter who came, no matter what danger knocked on that door, he would protect her. Even if it meant standing alone against the world. He didn't know it yet. But the outlaws were closer than either of them imagined, and the next sunrise would bring a challenge he couldn't avoid. The quiet bond they had built would soon be tested in ways neither expected. Clayton did not sleep much that night. Even with the warmth of the fire and Nayeli resting safely against him, his mind stayed alert. Something deep inside told him the outlaws were not far. He knew men like them, men who hunted the weak, who didn't fear the cold or the law. If they had come this close already, they wouldn't just give up. When the first light of dawn touched the frosted window, Clayton slowly shifted away from Nayeli so she wouldn't wake abruptly. She stirred a little, but did not open her eyes. Her face looked peaceful for once, no longer tight with fear or cold. He watched her for a moment, strangely grateful that she could finally rest without trembling or hiding. Clayton rose quietly, put on his boots, and stepped outside. The air was bitter but calm. Breath steaming, he moved around the cabin, checking the tracks he had seen yesterday. Fresh snow had fallen overnight, but underneath he could still see the faint outlines of hooves and boots. They had passed again closer this time. He knelt down, brushing the snow aside. The tracks circled his cabin. Someone had watched them during the night. Clayton stood slowly, jaw tightening. They were being hunted. Not by wild animals, but by dangerous men. He returned inside and locked the door behind him. Nayeli was sitting up now, blinking sleep away. She looked stronger than yesterday, but her eyes still carried shadows of worry. Clayton approached gently. Nayeli. They were here last night. Nayeli. Her breath caught, and her hands tightened around the blanket. How close? Close enough to walk around the cabin, Clayton said. But they didn't come in. Maybe they weren't sure if anyone was inside. Nayeli closed her eyes for a moment, trying to steady her thoughts. Panic tried to rise in her, but she pushed it back. She had survived many dangers. She could survive this too, especially now that she was not alone. What do we do? She asked softly. Clayton pulled a chair next to her so they could talk eye to eye. We stay calm, and we prepare. They might come back today, or tomorrow, but they will come. She nodded slowly. I do not want harm to reach you. Clayton smiled gently. You're not the reason for trouble. They are. And I won't let them hurt either of us. Nayeli studied his face. In the firelight, he looked steady, sure of himself. Something in her heart felt lighter, knowing she had someone willing to stand with her, not for reward, not out of obligation, but simply because it was right. The hours passed quietly at first. Clayton taught Nayeli how to reload the old fireplace safely, and she helped prepare simple food. Even with danger nearby, they shared small moments of warmth, soft conversations, occasional smiles, a quiet understanding. But the peace didn't last long. Around midday, Dusty the horse suddenly snorted loudly and paced near the fence. Clayton stepped to the window. 3 figures on horseback were approaching from the trees, moving slowly, deliberately. They weren't hiding. Clayton's voice dropped. Nayeli, they're here. Her hands trembled, but she stood up anyway. She walked closer to Clayton, trusting his presence more than her own footing. The men came closer, stopping just a few yards from the cabin. Dusty stomped and pulled his reins, uneasy. Clayton opened the door and stepped outside, closing it behind him but leaving it unlatched so Nayeli could hear. She stood close to the door inside, her hand pressed to her chest, listening. The leader of the trio, a tall man with a rough beard and a long coat, smiled in a way that felt wrong. Mornin', Cowboy, he drawled sarcastically. We're looking for someone. Clayton kept his posture calm, though his heart beat faster. This is my land. You shouldn't be here. The man shrugged. We ain't staying long. Just want to ask if you've seen an Apache woman around. His eyes narrowed, studying Clayton too closely. Pretty one. Long dark hair. Runs real fast. Clayton kept his expression neutral. Haven't seen anyone. The outlaw smirked. See? That's funny. 'Cause we tracked her footsteps right near your creek. And her trail ends real close to this cabin. Clayton didn't look away. Many animals and travelers come through these parts. Tracks get mixed up. Many. The second outlaw, shorter but mean-eyed, leaned forward on his horse. We ain't asking for stories, just the truth. You hand her over, and we ride away. Clayton's jaw tightened. There's no woman here. The leader's smile disappeared. His voice grew colder. We know she's here. Now, we ain't looking for trouble. But if we gotta search that cabin ourselves. Clayton stepped forward just a bit, making his stance clear. No one searches my cabin. A long silence followed. Snowflakes drifted between them. The wind picked up, brushing dust off the horse's hooves. Inside, Nayeli pressed her ear harder against the door. Her chest burned with fear, not for herself now, but for Clayton. She had brought danger into his life. She lowered her head, gripping the blanket as tears threatened to fall. Outside, the leader of the outlaws tilted his head, eyeing Clayton with irritation. You sure you want to stand in our way? Over someone who ain't even yours? Clayton didn't blink. I'll stand in your way over what's right. The man's expression twisted. Wrong answer. He reached for his rifle. Before the situation could explode, Nayeli suddenly pushed the door open and stepped out. Clayton spun around, shocked. Nayeli. She shook her head, stepping beside him, her voice trembling but strong. No more danger for him. The outlaws grinned cruelly when they saw her. There she is, the leader said. Knew you were hiding something, cowboy. Clayton moved immediately, stepping in front of Nayeli. She tried to protest, but he kept his arm slightly out, protecting her. You're not taking her, Clayton said. The three outlaws exchanged looks. The leader chuckled. You really want to die? Over an Apache woman? Clayton didn't raise his voice. He didn't move. He simply said, if that's what it comes to. The outlaws stared at him, surprised. Most men backed down when danger grew this close, but Clayton stood like a stone wall. Quiet, firm, unshaken. A tense moment passed. Then the leader spit to the side. We ain't wasting bullets on you today, he muttered. Cold's bad enough without a fight. He narrowed his eyes at Nayeli. But we'll find her again. She can't hide forever. Clayton took a single step forward, his voice sharp. If you come back, you'll regret it. The outlaws hesitated. Clayton's tone wasn't loud, but something in it held strength they didn't want to test. Finally, the leader jerked his reins and turned away. The others followed, riding off into the trees. Within moments, the cold swallowed their shapes. Clayton watched until they disappeared. He breathed deeply, then turned to Nayeli. Her eyes filled with emotion, fear, guilt, relief, and something deeper. You should have let me go, she whispered. I don't want danger for you. Clayton shook his head gently. I wasn't going to let them take you. Not after everything you've been through. Her voice broke. You don't know me, but you protect me with your life. Maybe I don't know everything, he said softly. Nayeli stepped a little closer, her eyes shining. I thought I would die. In the snow, or in their hands. But you saved me. Twice. Clayton gave a small smile. You saved yourself by fighting this long. I'm just helping a bit. They stood facing each other, snow falling softly around them. Something quiet and warm passed between them. A bond built not on words, but on trust, danger, and shared warmth through the coldest nights. Clayton finally spoke. You can't stay here. It's too risky. But there's a settlement not too far from here. Some Apache families trade there. I can take you in the morning. You'll be safe with them. Nayeli lowered her eyes. Safe. Yes. But. She stopped, voice trembling. I do not want to leave you. The confession hung in the cold air. Clayton's heart tightened. He felt something too, a connection stronger than anything he had expected. But he knew she needed safety first. We'll see each other again, he said softly. I promise. She looked up, searching his face. She believed him. The next morning, Clayton saddled Dusty and helped Nayeli onto the horse. She held his hand for a long moment before they rode off. The journey was quiet, peaceful. When they reached the settlement, Nayeli turned to him, eyes full of gratitude. "You saved me," she whispered. "Not just my life. You saved my spirit." Clayton's voice softened. "And you reminded me what it means to care." She touched his hand once more, warm, gentle, full of meaning. As she stepped toward safety, she repeated the words he had spoken on the coldest night of her life. "No one deserves to freeze, not even alone." Clayton watched her go, feeling the truth of her words settle deep in his heart. He rode home slowly, the memory of her warmth beside him lasting far longer than any winter cold. And somewhere in the quiet distance, Nayeli looked back one last time, carrying with her the comfort of the man who had held her through the cold and protected her through danger, a cowboy whose kindness would stay with her forever.